Okay, so for as long as I've been a part of the governor's school, and I think even when I was in the 8th grade as well, I remember thinking about constantly the senior project, and I actually think it gave me more anxiety than any of the projects we ever had at hand. And throughout the years, I remember thinking of so many ideas that I had, none of which I can recall right now, but I'm sure they were good. Looking at it now and actually entering in senior year, I remember that first month really having no idea what I wanted to do. I had so much stuff written down, and I had so many ideas of things I wanted to pursue, and none really seemed to just fit. And I remember talking with my mom about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go with this, hopefully thinking maybe this is something I want to set myself up with for the rest of my life. And my mom said to me, why not go back to sleep? In the second semester of my freshman year, I was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder known as narcolepsy. From there, my life was forever altered, and I found myself with a new routine, one of which was constantly bombarded with sleep. For those who don't know what narcolepsy is, it's easiest to just say that narcolepsy is when your mind confuses dreaming and day-to-day life. You're constantly overwhelmed with sleepiness, subjected to hallucinations, and for whatever reason, trying not to fall asleep. So from there, I found myself entering a world that I had once again entered when I was 14, and wondering what it was like for different dreaming minds. Now, I ended up finding an article back when I was trying to decide, what direction do I want to take with dreaming? What is dreaming? What does our brain do when we dream? There are a lot of different directions I honestly could have taken it. And I ended up finding an article with the New York Times that addressed what it meant to dream in different cultures. This was something I had never really considered before. Don't we all just dream the same? That's not necessarily the case. And what the woman in the New York op-ed article went on to suggest is that dreaming across cultures is something entirely different than what we would maybe expect in the United States or simply in Western culture. Dreaming itself can be considered a social phenomenon. So from there, I went to ask, how does dream culture vary across different demographics? How does it change from culture to culture, society to society? And even more, how does the culture pattern dream affect given societies? To start with this, we have to go to the late 19th and early 20th century. And at the time, scientists in Europe were kind of getting to a point where they were questioning, what is the dreaming mind? A lot of research had been produced of what they considered was universal for all dreams. There were 5 typical to Europe. It was fear of fire, incestuous relationships. They were really odd. And they were nope, these are universal. Everybody dreams of this. But from there, scientists went on to ask if we can find universal trends in what Europeans dream about, do they apply to the rest of the world? Now, looking at that, we had anthropologists and also psychologists at the time traveling to different countries in the hopes of finding universality among different types of dream culture. Pioneers of the time, especially James Burnett Tyler, and then as well as James Fraser, would go on to suggest that these people, especially the indigenous people of South America, Africa, even Asia, have an inability to distinguish dreaming from everyday life. Because they wouldn't justify given dream cultures, what we come to find is that Western culture was able to say that these are primitive people. An inability to see waking life and dreaming life means that you're not as socially advanced. From there came different forms of research. Perhaps dreaming is the creation of imagination. Perhaps dreaming gave light to different forms of religion. Maybe indigenous people of these countries have given birth to their own cultures through dreaming, simply because they have an inability to distinguish waking life and dreaming life. From there, we explore the subjective space known as dreaming. This would exemplify Western culture, where we have waking life, a separation, and dreaming. The two are inherently different. They are separated, whether it be by sleep or some other mechanism unknown. However, what many pioneers of the time in regards to dream culture, whether an anthropologist or a psychologist, failed to recognize is that in different cultures, it can exist in an entirely different way. Waking life and dreaming can exist within the same plane of reality, still different, but simply an extension of life. Similarly, waking life and dreaming can overlap, still different, but once again, an extension of life. It is a place where information can be looked upon. You can take ideas from it. You can see the information within dreams and look towards the future, take omens from it, understand it in a different light. In some cultures, waking life and dreaming occur all together. If you still notice though, there's still the overlap. Waking life, dreaming life. If you go all the way back, there's this line. And the farther into dream culture you get, the more that line becomes blurred. Still exist, just a little more faint. From there, as I explored the dream cultures of the Paratintin in South America onto the shores of Kyrgyzstan, I suddenly came to a realization of what it meant to dream. As Michael Foucault said in his 1986 essay, dreaming is an innate human condition, something that should be built upon, something that should be learned from. From there is a parable by Shang Zhu, which was outlined by Wad H. Crack in one of his 1970s essays. It explains what it means for dream culture to exist in other societies, how people take it differently than what we're so accustomed to in Western culture. And it goes, if I wake from a dream that I am a butterfly, am I a man who has dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming that I am a man? It goes to show that dreaming is not something as rigid as perhaps we've always given light to it. In fact, dreaming is more of a fluid social convention than anything else. From there, with all my research in hand and finally a research paper to show for it, I'm probably going to talk about my internship. This is Dr. Winter, and in fact, he was the doctor who diagnosed me with narcolepsy when I was a freshman in high school. And I remember it was like early August, or it might have even been the summer, I'm not really sure. And I went to him just for like a daily checkup, and I was like, oh, hey, like, would you be interested in this? And I like tried to explain my thesis to him. And he was so excited. He was like, yes. He's like, I want to be your mentor. He was like, I don't want anybody else to be your mentor. And from there, it became quite a journey. I don't think it was anything I expected. He is a neurologist. He works with Charlottesville Neurology and Sleep Medicine, and he has a specialty in sleep. So in regards to working with him, I had a lot of like internship duties. The first, if you recognize this H, it's the logo for the Huffington Post. He's an op-ed contributor. I found myself on more than one occasion actually editing articles that he was putting into the Huffington Post, which, you know, you're like, how is that related to sleep? But it's very interesting because all of them were totally sleep related. Even further, I went on to work with the New York Rangers, which is a hockey team. He was given a grant in 2006 by the Major League Baseball, there we go, and it was to study sleep and athletics. So I found myself actually taking in sleep data from the New York Rangers and sending it back out to them to let them know what their sleep was looking like, how it was affecting their performance. From there, I didn't get to work with a lot of other teams, but I did get to see a lot of other things. He works with the Oklahoma City Thunder. He worked with the Chicago Bulls at one point. He's worked with a bunch of MLB teams as well as NHL. So I got to see Kevin Durant's brain. Sorry about it, guys. From there, one of the most interesting things that I got to do in my internship was I got to sit down with actual patients. And it's very interesting to be on the other end of it. Because when you can't sleep or when you're sleeping too much and when you don't have control of your body like that, it's something so frustrating. And people sit on the other end of you and they just want answers. And I think sometimes it's even more frustrating when you don't have any. But similarly, every single day I got to see people, whether it was sleep apnea, narcolepsy, a multitude of things. And I remember what I consider one of the most important patients to ever come into that office. The patient was a woman. She came in very heavily handicapped. She had a walker, could not walk very well at all, to be quite honest, and she came in with her spouse. And they sat down. I wasn't even supposed to be in on that patient meeting. I was working on something else, I'm not even sure what. And Dr. Winter called me in. He was like, hey, I want you to meet somebody. And I sit down. She tries to shake my hand, and she kind of misses. And I kind of look at Dr. Winter kind of like, what? And he goes on to tell me that she's had 2 major strokes in her brain. And it has basically debilitated her. Later, when we got back into his office, I kind of said, I was like, you know, it was very interesting meeting her. She was so nice. Her spouse was so nice too. And I was like, what were we testing her for? Because we talked a lot about her stroke. We didn't talk a lot about her sleep. And he goes, oh, sleep apnea. Which, of course, if you don't know what sleep apnea is, it's when you're asleep at night and you actually stop breathing. And most people, like, when they have sleep apnea, they kind of, like, choke or they, like, gasp to, like, get their breath and they wake up. And, like, a lot of times you are so tired, like, you don't get a lot of sleep because you're constantly, like, choking and waking up, even if it's just for a second. So I kind of said something along the lines of, like, that poor woman, like, you know, like 2 strokes, like 2 major strokes. It's terrible. And he went on to say, you know, the signs for sleep apnea are apparent from a very young age. Doctors should know how to spot them. The fact that this woman has been in like 15 to 20 years of limbo just because a doctor wouldn't turn around and say maybe she needs a sleep study has handicapped her for the rest of her life. And just like those pioneers in dream culture, I suddenly looked around on our society and noticed that we don't take sleep seriously. My condition has forced me to be responsible. It's forced me to be diligent, and there are a lot of things I can't do because of it. That doesn't stop me, I promise you. But when you look around and you see insomnia rates rising, mental disorders rising, you see people out there having 2 strokes simply because doctors won't look at the fact and say, maybe it's sleep related. For people with narcolepsy like myself, about 1 in 2,000 get it. There should be about 250,000 in the United States. 25% are diagnosed. The rest will be misdiagnosed with depression, schizophrenia, and will live their life in limbo until somebody turns around and says, we need a sleep study. But Jordan, wait, what about your community service? Oh yeah, that. I remember when I was trying to come up with my community service, I was like, oh, you know, that. And I was really, really questioning, what am I going to do about dreaming? Like, hey, everyone, let's go take like a group nap. there weren't a whole lot of things that I could really decide what to do with that. I remember talking to Miss Wilson, like, you know, like, I really don't know what to do here. She was like, how about you make dream catchers with kids? I was like, that's cute, but no. So suddenly, in just the midst of all this, I just decided I was going to work on my internship. I'm like, I'm sure community service will come. Like, you know, something will happen. But I go all the way back to this slide, and this slide, and this slide, and this slide. Like I said earlier, every single dream culture acknowledges that there is a difference between dreaming and waking life, no matter the overlap. It is the common consensus. But it suddenly occurred to me, sorry. That line doesn't exist for people with narcolepsy. It's never really been there to begin with. Dreaming and reality take place on the same plane of existence. There's no line. There's no concept to distinguish any of it. So from there, I thought, what can I do? When diagnosing narcolepsy, symptoms become most apparent when kids are sitting, when they're not doing anything. It's during lengthy periods of inactivity that the symptoms of narcolepsy become exposed. Most people develop it in their adolescence to like teenage years, although it can develop way later in life as well. And suddenly I began to realize we need to have screening programs in schools. I'm not saying we take every kid in and be like, hey, do you sleep more than you should? No. But teachers, educators, guidance counselors should be on the lookout for kids that fall asleep. We live in a society that when you fall asleep in class or when you fall asleep at work, it's get up, it's time to work, it's time to go. Instead of asking the question of, are you okay? Are you tired? Did you not get enough sleep last night? Because it goes back to the same problem that society doesn't put enough emphasis on sleep. For people, not machines. From there, what I plan to do with my community service is I want to reach out to at least 10 schools. I can settle for 7, But I want to talk with educators about what it means to screen for kids with narcolepsy, to understand sleep disorders. If a kid's falling asleep in class and you simply reach out and ask, what is the harm? What is the harm? They can simply say, I had a lot of homework, I didn't get to bed last night. Maybe it's not a sleep disorder. Maybe their parents are fighting. Maybe they have a broken home. This is a linkage institution that educators can use to help kids, no matter the cause. I actually met in October with someone from the Narcolepsy Network, which is like an institution that was recently started in the 1980s to help people with narcolepsy to create a community because it is a rare disease. And I mean, there just aren't a lot of people that you can just like, I can't like go to the store and be like, hey, who has narcolepsy? Because I'm sure everyone's gonna be like, who are you? But from that, I don't know what my life would be like if I hadn't been diagnosed. I don't know what it would be like if I hadn't gone to a sleep doctor first and if I had just gone to a normal doctor. I don't know what my life would be like. And I think it's very hard for me to consider the fact that kids could go on for years without knowing, without having help. From there, and this was something recent as well, I decided I want to send a letter to the governor. I want to send a letter to our congresswomen, and I want to talk about what it means for kids to not get enough sleep during their teenage years. There's been so much discussion, so many studies that recently come out about how teenagers need sleep, how they need it to grow, how they need it to develop, how they need it to cope with day-to-day life. But yeah, we're being so overwhelmed by homework that, I mean, I have a sleep disorder. It's not one that I talk about. I'm sharing it with you guys now. But when kids are up till 2 or 3 in the morning just trying to complete homework and they're falling asleep in class the next day, who is that helping? And who is that benefiting? That's the word. I want to see if we can get a discussion started on legislation in schools that helps manage the amount of homework load, that teaches kids time management as opposed to get it done as fast as you can. That's what we need to be teaching kids instead of just survive. It's the work world. This is the amount of like work that you take on. Because I don't think our world needs to be like that. And I think this is the way that you make a difference. The future. In regards to this project has been endured. And it is one I'm so grateful for, more than anything. And looking now, I have my whole life ahead of me. Sometimes I question if maybe I'll go into the medical field. Maybe I want to help people with sleep problems for the rest of their lives. But in regards to like you guys who have to do senior projects next year, pick something you're interested in. Not even something you want to base your life around. This is your one chance to build something you may never touch again. I don't know if I'm ever going to go to dream culture. I probably won't. But I got a chance to understand it on a deep and personal level, to devote my time to it. And it has made me so, so happy. I mean, in regards to my community service, none of it started, it's planned. And I'm not scared to say that I procrastinated. But in this world, you're going to procrastinate. And I think it's less about admitting that you did it. I mean, you can lie about it and be like, no, I'm getting work done, which I probably did in this wasn't like 400 times. But the reality is, if you're gonna procrastinate, which know what you're gonna do when the time winds down. I think that's just as important when making your transition into the real world. And that was my senior project.
I'd like to ask you, Chris Winter is my doctor.
Really?
So during your whole presentation, I was thinking, I wonder if she talked to Dr. Winter, and then you got to.
Yeah.
Did he have any experience with what you were investigating on the dreaming?
Actually, he did. He knew a man. His name, I think it was Von Castle. That's right, Robert Von Castle, if I remember. And he has a PhD essentially in, if I remember correctly, it was something medical. But he spent his entire life looking at the dreaming mind. He actually created a huge book, and it's called The Dreaming Mind, or Our Dreaming Mind. And it was given me by Dr. Winter, who discussed with me on multiple occasions what it meant to dream, and what dreaming was, and what it meant for different cultures, and like how it was a mechanism for the human mind. So there were constant conversations that came up about that, and it was more interesting to apply that to a very real world setting, especially because when patients would come in, if they were narcoleptic or if they did oversleep, it was often a question of, what do you dream about? It was an icebreaker, but it became very, very interesting to see how people dreamt and what it meant to them.
And you just plan to do your community service? You haven't started any of it?
It is planned. What I have ready for the community service is when I met with this woman in October from the Narcolepsy Network, who was very excited about my senior internship. She gave me a bunch of pamphlets that's about like students with narcolepsy in schools, and how educators and nurses and guidance counselors can recognize the symptoms and they can address that. So essentially what I'm doing with my community service is taking these pamphlets. There's like 15 for the middle school, 15 for the high school, because it's 1 in 2,000. You know, it may happen, it may not, but they're on hand and they're ready. So essentially what I'm doing is going to schools and giving a presentation about the fact that this is how we can screen for it. This is how we create a key linkage institution. This is how we move forward with it. And I'm giving them like said pamphlets. I was really going to try to hit all the Vera VGS schools because I feel like they'd be incredibly understanding, but I'm also looking at Culpeper schools as well as Charlottesville schools because they have such a high student population that it's probably even more important considering they have like 3,000 students.
But have you handed them out in Madison?
No, not yet. I need to
Okay.
make a winner Mr. Winter scale.
Okay.
I know that some businesses have actually started to have places where their employees can take naps during the day. Did you come across anything in your research that talked about the importance of that?
I have heard and I have seen about like business places having places to nap. And all I know from what I did see, because it wasn't super relevant to my research paper, it was more relevant to my argument within like my internship with my community service. What I did see was it did do a lot to increase worker productivity, just having those power naps, because power naps are so good for you anyways, like just to rebolster, I think, throughout the day. So no, they're definitely helpful, and I think like there should be more of them.
Very interesting. Enjoyed it.
Okay.